Your stomach is on fire, not metaphorically. You ate something bad, and now your body is punishing you. Every muscle in your abdomen is cramping. You are sweating. You are nauseous. You would do almost anything to make it stop. Now imagine you are in a forest. There are hundreds of plants around you. Some of them will kill you if you eat them. Some will do nothing. Some will do nothing. Worse. And a tiny handful, if you pick exactly the right leaf, at exactly the right time, prepared exactly the right way, will actually make the pain go away. How did ancient humans figure out which ones worked? This is not a story of random trial and error. It is a story of systematic observation, animal mimicry, and knowledge passed unbroken across hundreds of generations. It is the story of how your ancestors became the best botanists the world has ever known. And the answer starts with a Neanderthal tooth. In 2012, a team of researchers led by Karen Hardy at the University of Glasgow published a study that changed how we think about ancient medicine. They analyzed dental calculus, the hardened plaque on Neanderthal teeth from the El Sidrón cave in Spain. The teeth were 49,000 years old, and they contained plant residues that made no sense from a nutritional perspective. The Neanderthals at El Sidrón had been eating yarrow and camomile. Both of these plants are intensely bitter. They have almost no caloric value. They taste terrible. Anyone who eats them is not eating them for food. But yarrow and chamomile have one thing in common. They are both medicinal. Yarrow has been used for thousands of years to treat digestive problems and reduce inflammation. Chamomile is a mild sedative and anti-inflammatory. The Neanderthals were not eating these plants by accident. They were self-medicating. Think about what this means. 50,000 years before the first pharmacy, before the first written prescription, before the first doctor, there was a Neanderthal with a stomachache who walked into a forest, identified a specific plant among hundreds, prepared it, and consumed it to treat their pain. That is not dumb. That is medicine. Now let us ask the obvious question. How did they know? The first answer is the simplest one. They watched animals. In 2003, primatologist Michael Huffman at Kyoto University published a landmark study on something called zoopharmacognosy. That is a fancy word for animals, using plants as medicine. Huffman spent years observing chimpanzees in Tanzania. He documented something remarkable. When chimpanzees had intestinal parasites, they would carefully select specific leaves from a plant called Aspilia. They did not chew them. They swallowed them whole. The rough leaves would pass through their digestive system and physically scrape the parasites off their intestinal walls. Then the leaves and the parasites would come out the other end. These chimpanzees were not randomly eating leaves. They were treating a specific illness with a specific plant using a specific preparation method. They knew what they were doing. Now imagine an ancient human watching this. A human with a stomachache sees a chimpanzee with similar symptoms eating a specific plant. The human tries the same plant. The pain goes away. A connection is made. A piece of knowledge is born. Over thousands of years, this observational process built up into a vast database of medicinal plants. Every generation added to it. Every generation refined it. But observation was only the beginning. Ancient humans also used a structured elimination process. Think about how you would figure out which plants are edible if you had no prior knowledge. You cannot just start eating random leaves. Many plants contain deadly toxins. A single bite of hemlock can kill you. A single berry from a deadly nightshade can stop your heart. Ancient humans developed systematic methods for testing plants. They did not just guess. They used a decision tree. Step 1. Does the plant have a strong or unusual odor? Some toxic plants have a distinct smell that warns you right away. If the smell is sharp, acrid, or nauseating, the plant is suspect. Step 2. Touch, crush a leaf and rub it on your skin. Does it cause irritation, burning, numbness? If yes, the plant is likely toxic. Step 3. Taste. Touch a tiny piece to your tongue. Does it burn? Go numb? Taste intensely bitter? Bitterness is a reliable indicator of alkaloids, many of which are toxic. Your tongue has 25 different types of bitter taste receptors, each tuned to detect different classes of toxic compounds. Step 4. Wait. If the plant passes the taste test, eat a very small amount and wait several hours. Does it make you sick? If yes, you have identified a toxic plant without dying. Step 5. If the small dose produces no ill effects, try a slightly larger dose and wait again. This process, documented by ethnobotanist Timothy Johns in his 1993 book With Bitter Herbs They Shall Eat It, is called the bifurcated elimination method. It sounds primitive. It is actually a sophisticated form of systematic testing that minimizes risk while maximizing information gain. Ancient humans did not just eat random plants and die. They tested plants in controlled ways that allowed them to build knowledge without killing themselves. But here is where the story gets even more interesting. Ancient humans did not just learn which plants worked. They learned how to prepare them. Many medicinal plants are not simply edible raw. They require processing. Some need to be dried. Some need to be boiled. Some need to be fermented. Some need to be combined with other plants to activate their compounds. Some are toxic unless prepared correctly. Take the example of the cinchona tree. The bark of this tree contains quinine, one of the most effective treatments for malaria ever discovered. Indigenous peoples of South America knew about cinchona bark for centuries before Europeans arrived. They ground it into a powder. They mixed it with water. They drank it to treat fevers. But here is the key. They did not just eat the bark, they processed it. They understood that the active compound needed to be extracted in a specific way. They had figured out the chemistry without knowing the word chemistry. A 2010 study from the University of Mississippi found that traditional preparation methods for cinchona bark actually extracted more quinine than modern pharmaceutical methods. The indigenous people who developed these methods did not have laboratories. They did not have chemical analysis. They had generations of trial, error, observation, and refinement. Now let us look at the archaeological evidence. In 1998, researchers at Shanidar Cave in Iraqi Kurdistan made a remarkable discovery. Pollen analysis of the soil around a Neanderthal burial site revealed the presence of several medicinal flowers, including ephedra, yarrow, and groundsel. These flowers had been placed around the body deliberately. This is not just medicine. This is medicine with meaning. Someone gathered flowers, not for their beauty, but for their power. They placed them around the dead as protection, as healing for the journey beyond. This is the earliest evidence we have of medicinal knowledge being used not just for the body, but for the spirit. And it happened 60,000 years ago. Let us jump forward to more recent history. In the 16th century, European colonists in the Americas encountered indigenous medical systems that were more sophisticated than anything they had brought with them. The Aztecs had botanical gardens containing hundreds of medicinal plants. The Inca had surgeons who performed successful skull surgeries. The Maya had a pharmacopoeia that treated everything from infections to mental illness. When the Spanish conquistadors arrived in Mexico, they brought their own doctors. Within decades, those doctors were using indigenous remedies because they worked better than European ones. A 2007 study in the Journal of Ethnopharmacology analyzed 122 medicinal plants used by indigenous peoples of the Amazon. Of those, 89 had measurable pharmacological activity. Many are still used in modern pharmaceuticals today. The active compound in aspirin, salicylic acid, was originally derived from willow bark, used for thousands of years by indigenous peoples across multiple continents. We think of ancient medicine as superstition. It was not. It was data. It was accumulated information about cause and effect, observed and transmitted across hundreds of generations. Every time a plant worked, the knowledge was preserved. Every time a plant killed someone, the knowledge was preserved. Over millennia, the database grew more accurate. The useless plants were forgotten. The useful ones were remembered. Your ancestors did not have science, but they had something just as powerful. They had time. They had patience. They had the ability to observe, remember, and transmit. And they had this realization: the natural world is full of medicines. You just have to learn how to find them. Now let us bring this back to your body, because you are carrying the legacy of this knowledge in your own biology. Remember those bitter taste receptors we talked about? You have 25 of them. Each one is tuned to detect a specific class of toxic compounds. These receptors evolved over millions of years specifically to help your ancestors identify which plants were safe to eat and which were dangerous. Every time you taste something bitter and feel a flicker of aversion, you are experiencing the accumulated wisdom of your evolutionary history. Your body is telling you something that your ancestors learned through thousands of years of trial and error. Be careful with this one, your tongue says. It might be medicine, but it might be poison. Proceed with caution. You do not need to know the chemical structure of alkaloids to avoid them. Your body already knows. It has been learning for 300,000 years. The next time you have a stomachache and reach for a bottle of Pepto-Bismol, pause for a second. That pink liquid is not the first treatment for stomach pain. It is just the latest. Behind it are 50,000 years of plant knowledge. Neanderthals chewing yarrow, chimpanzees swallowing aspilia leaves, indigenous healers grinding cinchona bark, generations of humans testing, observing, remembering, and passing on what they learned. Your ancestors figured it out. You are just taking the modern version. But maybe, the next time you walk through a forest, you will look at the plants a little differently. You will wonder which ones might save your life. You will wonder which ones your ancestors knew about. You will wonder what knowledge we have forgotten. Because we have forgotten. Of the estimated 400,000 plant species on Earth, modern science has thoroughly studied less than 10% for medicinal properties. Indigenous peoples around the world have used thousands more for centuries. Much of that knowledge is disappearing as traditional cultures fade. We are losing the database that your ancestors spent 300,000 years building, and we do not even know what we are losing. Your body still remembers, though. Your tongue still tests. Your stomach still warns. The knowledge is not gone. It is just dormant, waiting for you to pay attention again. Let me tell you about Kalahari San shamans. When a San healer treats a patient with stomach pain, they do not just hand them a leaf. They perform a ritual, they dance, they sing, they enter a trance state, and then, while in that trance, they select the plant. Western observers for centuries dismissed this as superstition. But a 2015 study from the University of the Witwatersrand in South Africa found something unexpected. The San shamans were selecting plants with actual pharmacological activity. The rituals were not just spiritual performances. They were a delivery system for medical knowledge encoded in ceremony. Here is how it works. The trance state allows the shaman to access a different mode of consciousness. In this mode, they are more attuned to subtle differences between plants. They notice variations in leaf shape, stem texture, root color. They recall the location of specific plants they have not visited in years. The dance is not just a dance. It is a memory retrieval system. And the plants they select, they contain antimicrobial compounds. They contain anti-inflammatory agents. They contain compounds that reduce intestinal spasms. The San have been treating stomach pain with effective plant medicines for thousands of years. They just delivered the treatment through a cultural framework that Western medicine did not understand. This pattern repeats across every continent. The Aztecs had a system of medicine that included over 1,200 plant species. The Chinese developed a pharmacopoeia of over 5,000 substances. The Ayurvedic tradition of India documented hundreds of medicinal plants with precise preparation instructions. Each of these systems was developed independently, using the same basic methods. Observe, test, remember, transmit. Now let us talk about the doctrine of signatures. This is an old idea that plants that look like a body part can treat that body part. A liver-shaped leaf is good for the liver. A heart-shaped flower is good for the heart. Modern science has mostly dismissed this as mystical nonsense. But here is the strange thing. Sometimes it works. The plant Hepatica nobilis has leaves shaped like a human liver. For centuries, European herbalists used it to treat liver conditions. Modern analysis shows that Hepatica nobilis actually contains hepatoprotective compounds. It really does protect the liver. The plant Hypericum perforatum, St. John's wort, has translucent dots on its leaves that look like tiny holes. The doctrine of signatures suggested it could treat wounds. Modern science shows it has significant antimicrobial and antidepressant properties. Coincidence? Probably, but it is a coincidence that ancient healers exploited successfully for thousands of years. They noticed that certain plants with certain shapes had certain effects. They built a classification system based on those observations. And even though their theoretical framework was wrong, their practical results were often right. This is how science actually works. You do not need a correct theory to find correct treatments. You just need systematic observation and the willingness to remember what works. And ancient humans were masters of this. Let me give you a concrete example from the archaeological record. In 2018, researchers at the University of York analyzed the contents of a 1,000-year-old medicinal pot found in the Netherlands. The pot contained a mixture of plants that included garlic, onion, goose fat, betony, and extracts from the apple of Sodom. The mixture was used to treat infections. When the researchers tested the mixture in a laboratory, it killed 99% of the antibiotic-resistant bacteria it was tested against. Methicillin-resistant Staphylococcus aureus, MISE, one of the most dangerous hospital superbugs, and a 1,000-year-old mixture from a pot in the Netherlands killed it. Think about that for a second. We spend billions of dollars developing new antibiotics to fight resistant bacteria, and a mixture that a medieval healer put together 1,000 years ago does the same job. The knowledge was there. It was just forgotten. Now let us zoom out and look at the bigger picture of how medicinal knowledge evolved. A 2006 study in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences mapped the evolutionary history of medicinal plant use across human populations. The study found that medicinal knowledge does not spread randomly. It follows clear patterns. Plants that are widely distributed across multiple continents tend to be used for the same purposes by different cultures, the same plants for the same conditions. This means that different groups of humans, separated by oceans and continents, independently discovered the same medicinal uses for the same plants. The plant Artemisia annua, sweet wormwood, is used to treat fevers in China. It contains artemisinin, one of the most effective antimalarial drugs in existence. In 2015, Tuesday Yoyo won the Nobel Prize for her work on artemisinin. She derived the compound from a traditional Chinese remedy that had been used for over 2,000 years. Ancient Chinese healers did not know about malaria parasites, but they knew that a specific plant, prepared in a specific way, could cure a specific type of fever. That knowledge was preserved for 2,000 years. It eventually led to a Nobel Prize. This is not primitive knowledge, this is data, preserved, transmitted, refined. Over centuries, now let us talk about the most dangerous part of ancient medicine, the part that almost never gets mentioned in the popular narrative. For every plant that ancient humans discovered was medicinal. Someone had to take the risk of testing it. For every plant that cured a stomachache, there was a plant that killed the tester. We celebrate the successes, we forget the costs. But here is the thing, ancient humans were not reckless. They had protocols. They had a chain of testing that minimized risk. When a new plant was discovered, it was first tested by the most knowledgeable person in the group. The elder, the shaman, the healer. If they survived, the plant was tested on a smaller dose. If that was safe, it was added to the communal knowledge base. If the elder died, The plant was marked as deadly, and the information was passed on. This is not random trial and error. This is a structured testing protocol with built-in risk management. The most knowledgeable people took the biggest risks because they were the most qualified to identify danger. And if they failed, the group learned from their failure without losing anyone else. Imagine a pharmaceutical company running clinical trials this way. Put your best scientists in the highest risk trials. If they die, at least you learned something. That is how ancient medicine worked. Brutal, efficient, effective. And it worked. By the time written history began, humans had already identified the vast majority of medicinal plants that we use today. A 2012 study in the Journal of Natural Products found that over 60% of modern pharmaceutical drugs are derived from compounds first discovered in traditional medicinal plants. Aspirin, morphine, quinine, digoxin, atropine. The list goes on. Every time you take a painkiller, you are benefiting from knowledge that your ancestors acquired through testing. You are standing on the shoulders of generations of people who figured out which plants healed and which plants killed. And they did it without any of the tools we consider essential for science. No microscopes, no chemical analysis, no clinical trials. Just their senses, their memory, and their willingness to share what they learned. The next time your stomach hurts, think about the Neanderthal who chewed yarrow 50,000 years ago. Think about the chimpanzee that swallowed Aspilia leaves. Think about the sand shaman who danced until he found the right plant. And then think about your own tongue, because those 25 bitter taste receptors are not just there to make you dislike certain foods. They are a 300,000-year-old inheritance, a testing kit, a survival tool, a direct line to the accumulated knowledge of your ancestors. Your body knows what ancient humans knew. You just have to listen.